So great to have you here.
It's great to be here. I loved listening to your introductory remarks, and I feel very much the same way as you do about seeking the possible out of the impossible, about not giving up on this world and knowing that we can individually make a change and a difference and accelerate the process of making things better. So it's great to be here.
When we thought about accelerating possibilities, we can think of anyone who helps the rest of us think of ways we can do that by beginning those kinds of journeys with the truth, with knowing what we need to know. And yours has been quite a journey. I was thinking, as I was looking over these honors that just continue to pour in, Christiane, and the many different ways in which your accomplishments are noted. And since we've known each other from the very beginning of our careers, when we will not say how long ago that was, is this the narrative? Is the current Christiane story anything close to what you might have imagined the possibilities to be?
Well, not really, because I've actually been at CNN for 36 years nearly. In September, it'll be 36 years. I mean, I started as a desk assistant, so it was completely and utterly entry level, and worked my way up. But people often ask me, did you want to be a journalist all your life? Or when did you know you wanted to be a journalist? And I didn't, actually. I actually thought I was going to be a doctor, and I was at boarding school here in England, and long story short, I didn't get the right grades to go to medical school. So I was a little bit, wandering around in the wilderness and quite upset about what my life was going to be. And my parents and myself who'd grown up in Iran, because my father is Iranian, my mum was English, and I thought, oh, crumba, I'm gonna have to go back there and, I don't know, an arranged marriage or be a secretary, or I don't know what the hell was gonna be my path. And out of the blue came a revolution. Now, I really shouldn't be celebrating that, because it did, in fact, turn the world upside down. It turned families upside down. And the Islamic Revolution of Iran has been the template for the disruptive relations between East and West, and between Islam and Christianity, and the whole thing for the last 40 years. But I was old enough to recognize it, and to know that this was something massively important, and to be on the streets when suddenly my city was turned into martial law, and everybody who I'd grown up believing was on the heroic side turned out to be the villains, and vice versa, etc. So it was a major turning point, a major learning moment, but it also made me want to be a journalist, because I thought, wow, I want to tell these stories, I want to be able to explain these seismic shifts to people. And I also was very conscious of the photography, the pictures of the instance and the video of what was going on. So that's what made me want to be a journalist.
Well, the video of you on the front lines of war, when you came into our world and into our presence, is this most recognized face of CNN, a burgeoning source of news and information at the time. And sometimes people think, well, you were born in a fatigue jacket. You've been standing on front lines all your life, when in fact, working as a desk assistant was hardly there. So what sparked you to say, oh, that I can do?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not sure whether it's terribly fashionable or part of people's job descriptions or job expectations these days. But 36 years ago, when I first joined CNN, it was sort of absolutely taken for granted that you would start at the bottom, and if you were very lucky, you'd work your way up to somewhere. It wasn't just the expectation that you would arrive somewhere and all doors would be open to you and you would have this phenomenal, fantastic, great job and you'd be so fantastic. It didn't work like that. And actually, I'm kind of glad that it didn't work like that. No, I'm very glad, because I really believe that to be competent, to be authentic, to be able to have the authority, and especially for women, the word authority is very important, to be able to have the confidence to do this kind of work, or whatever kind of work, you need to learn it from the nuts and bolts upwards, and then create this thing that becomes your career, your mission, your purpose, or whatever it is. But it can't be created out of clouds. It has to be created out of scaffolding. And that scaffolding of working very hard and coming in on my own time and offering to do whatever it took, writing, you know, producing, cleaning my boss's desk, doing the Twinkie run, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I did, and I was also always said yes, and I actually asked for opportunities in which to say yes, and I would, you know, be very dramatic and say, I have to quit now because I really need to do this, and if you're not going to let me do it, I'm going to have to go somewhere else or do it on my own or whatever. So a couple of times I did that, and
I can testify to that, actually.
But I also walked, you know, filled dead man's shoes quite a few times, and they were men's shoes, and you know, that's what happened. And then when CNN exploded onto the world's consciousness was during the first Gulf War. And it just happened to be my first story.
Let's see, it just happened. Let's take a look at that early video. There's certainly no one here who who doesn't have this in there in memory embedded, but to remind us of what launched this narrative.
People were still marching.
This is the entrance to the city of Basra.
Here we are in Habila, a village that has not had any food distribution since June.
When the families have finished looking at the names that are posted on those boards, they come here. This is now a memorial to the victims of the Srebrenica massacre. Where in the Quran does it justify the killing of innocents? Christiane Amanpour, CNN, with elements of the Galilee division in Israel.
I'm Christiane Amanpour in Iran,
In Amsterdam, in Jerusalem, Washington, D.C. So come with me around the world. We're very interested to see what's going on here.
What do you think when you look at those images?
You know, I think, wow. I mean, I'm really...
That's sort of what we all think, too.
But the wow is more because I just can't believe I've had this unbelievable opportunity. I mean, it's just so phenomenal for me. And it's crazy. It's just crazy. I'm just an ordinary girl who grew up in a middle-class family in Iran, and this is what happened. And I grew up with CNN, and I feel CNN is in my DNA, and most particularly because, as you know very well, the founder of CNN was somebody who would lead an organization like this one, right? The Skoll, because everything that he believes, you all believe. He was the world's first, I'd say, entrepreneur with a conscience. Yeah. He created the media revolution with 24/7 CNN. He then went on to do, you know, bringing people together during the Cold War with the Goodwill Games. He was the first mega public capitalist person to lobby for the environment and for climate, corralling loose nukes after the fall of the Soviet Union. In other words, and most particularly, and this is really important in today's world, again, in our DNA at CNN, there is no other. We believe, and we have been taught to believe, that everybody counts. Ted Turner would not let us use the word foreign. It was international. And I was pissed because I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, you know? Instead, I had to be an international correspondent. Right. But the point was that each and every nationality, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic group, whatever it is, had its own place in the world and its own dignity, and we had to respect that, and we couldn't take these kinds of sides.
So true. And I respect so deeply that you bring this forward, because it is leadership. And it was Ted Turner and it is Jeff Skoll who have the leadership visions, which are shared in this case, which is news is too important not to make it, not to tell the stories that matter, know how hard it is to tell those stories. And you yourself went to the hardest places, and it's easy to admire that, as we do, as courage, as bravery. It took that because you were at great personal risk. In what ways were you thinking about the work then as a new way of storytelling, recognizing that you had an opportunity to create a new kind of narrative?
I think Bosnia was the turning point, and one of the first images there where I'm running across is under sniper fire and this and that. And Bosnia, which I covered along with many of my colleagues for the entire war, which was practically the whole of the 90s, Bosnia and then Kosovo, taught me everything about this job and about truth and neutrality and objectivity and about myself as a person and about our profession as a power for good. So just to quickly run down, Bosnia was the first place where journalists became deliberately targeted. Up until then, in Vietnam, in Central America, in the Middle East, etc., journalists generally were considered, friends of all sides. They could tell everybody's story, they were welcomed, and if they were injured or killed, it was usually, sadly, in the crossfire. In Bosnia, it changed completely, and therefore we lost a lot of people, wounded, killed. I always touch wood that luckily I survived unscathed in that physical way. Courage didn't occur to me at the time, because what you're trying to do is survive, and you have to have, your wits about you in order to do that. I learned afterwards, though, that moral courage was even more important than physical courage, and I always used to quote, and I still do, Robert Kennedy's famous speech in South Africa about moral courage and how that's even more difficult often than physical courage. And I learned that in a very clear way, in that I was profiled for my work in Bosnia, and somebody said, oh, but Christiane, she's taking sides, she's not objective. And I was very upset, and because objectivity is our golden rule, so I had to think about what that meant. And I said, well, what do they mean? I'm telling the truth. And the truth was that there was one side which were the victims and another side which were the aggressors. That's the truth. And international criminal law has enshrined that in the verdicts that the criminal tribunal in The Hague actually came out with after the war. One side were the aggressors, the other side were the victims. And I couldn't muddle the two. I knew it instinctively, and as a journalist, I had to tell the truth, and the truth meant that sometimes we were unpopular with the do-nothing brigade. Oh, all sides are equally guilty. Oh, it's centuries of ethnic hatred. And a lot of people believed that, therefore they did nothing, and therefore there were massacres every day of the week until we had Srebrenica, in which case our democratic world that's built on values like human rights and justice could no longer look away, and they had to intervene. So I basically said, objectivity does not mean neutrality. Truth does not mean neutrality. You cannot create false moral or factual equivalences. And if in cases of genocide and the wholesale violation of international humanitarian law, if you do that, A, you're lying, and B, you're an accessory. And I refuse to be an accessory to genocide in Bosnia.
This is the struggle to find the truth, to know the truth, becomes more and more daunting every day. We've had a lot of conversations about it at this year's forum. And in your struggle to get the truth of a story, the truth of a leader, and to bring it to us, you moved from those front lines to another kind of front line, which is a face-to-face confrontation with leaders. Let's take a quick look at just a bit of Amanpour, the show that you host for CNN.
Mr. Welcome to the program. President Barzani, Aung San Suu Kyi. Today we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
As long as he's here, I'm here.
I'm talking about President Trump.
Yes.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. What would you like the American people to know? And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives. I mean, you can't argue with that, right?
I can.
Your administration didn't do it. Big mistake, right?
I think it was a big mistake.
You're right in the middle of the Me Too moment. Do you think things are getting better? Do you fancy singing a few bars now? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
Is Russia making us racist? Is that who's doing it?
You say we shouldn't sugarcoat the consequences. This is surveillance. That's pretty controversial.
Well, it's the truth.
And fully understand what's at stake.
So among that group, which has included every single leader in the world, I think, maybe not, who have you not gotten to that you want to?
I'd like to talk to.
Donald
Trump.
That's right, you haven't. Well, I was just going to ask you who's been the hardest to get the truth from, but...
A lot of people.
May have just answered that question.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, my new mantra, for want of shorthand, is truthful, not neutral. I mean, that's a promo, so it's not, it's not some of the more, in-your-face opportunities that I've had with some of these people. But, you just got to hold them accountable. And you've just got to, I thought maybe if I could bring my experience in the field into the studio and just talk to people, and they know that I've been there. I mean, every single one of these interviews, I've been in the field. I've done the work before I sit down with them over a period of, nearly 30 years. So I feel confident. I feel that I can sit mano a mano with people, but it takes a huge amount of studying, a huge amount of research. I say sometimes it's almost like doing a PhD every single day. And of course, it's not because I can't, but you have to be seriously prepared. And it's not easy, and you have to be prepared not to be popular, and you have to be prepared not to be liked, and sometimes you have to sit there, with undemocratically elected leaders who are chest bristling with all sorts of medals which they either earned or didn't earn, and they've got, squads of heavily armed people around them, and you think if you're going to ask them the wrong question, you might get pounced on.
I wondered about that in watching Amanpour, as I do. Sometimes that feels like a more fearful or even dangerous environment.
Well, sometimes it is. I mean, when I went to ABC, I call it on assignment for a brief period of time when I left CNN. I said it was a whole different kind of war zone. And particularly at that time, I went to do a Washington Sunday morning talk show, which is a colossal failure, but I own my failures. And it was a colossal failure because they simply didn't want to be asked, the real questions. It was all process and politics, and we've seen where that's got us. So I believe in policy and trying to get real answers, and I also believe in solutions, and I know that there are solutions under all this mess, and I like to see if we can get it out. And the huge issues that we're faced with now, which are climate is my biggest issue. It should be everybody's biggest issue. And I think that here's another instance of how not being truthful and trying to be neutral has brought us to the brink of this cataclysmic moment where the press has also played a very negative role in trying to seek equal time and equal, fact, which is just not true. A handful of deniers and the overwhelming number of science cannot be treated equally. And it's the young people who are hopefully going to get us out of this, people like Greta Thunberg and the others who hopefully will shame the generation that has not done nearly enough.
Let's stay with this wide agreement from this audience, and we've been struggling with this in session after session. There isn't any subject that we don't tackle here at the forum in which the media and the role of the media, increasingly distressing, increasingly distrusted, plays a part. How do you feel about that, and what can we, as active, engaged citizens anywhere in the world, do about that?
Well, look, it's obviously very bothersome. I mean, to be in a profession which is suddenly, seriously distrusted is not a comfortable place to be. And it's actually quite sad because I strongly believe that this profession, especially in the democratic world, which has either constitutional or non-constitutional respect for freedom of expression and the free press, to be told, well, I don't know where to seek the truth is a little bit of a gut punch. And I think that there are places where you can find the truth. And I do believe that it is up to individuals now to search for that. We're doing our best. There are brands in this environment which have been proved to be truthful, trustworthy, credible, authentic, by dint of experience, longevity, and being at the pyramid, the top of the pyramid. So there's the CNNs, there's the New York Times, there's the Wall Street Journal, there's the BBC, there's everywhere in the world there is you can find the truth, but you have to be willing to do that and not be lazy and be overwhelmed and overcome by this ridiculous habit of just like social mediaing and scrolling and believing every stupid conspiracy theory that's out there. I think people have to take responsibility if they want to get the truth. Yeah, it's not just on us, it's on everybody.
It's such an important point, and let's talk about it just a bit more, because it is easy to kind of throw up your hands as a media consumer and say, well, it's just a landscape of babble, which it certainly feels like our set opinions and these, as we know, silos in which we are hearing the same echo over and over. But you as a journalist, you and someone working for a news organization, you are inside the beast, as it were. What can you do and what can we do?
Well, I think we can continue to do what we have to do, and that is the reporting, the seeking the facts, the seeking the truth, and bringing the stories. Look, I think I agree that if there are complaints that some of today's news, events, situations are covered too much in like panels and talking heads. And I'm a reporter. I actually came into the studio for personal reasons, for my son, and because, you know, he needed me at that particular time. I left Europe, I went to the United States. It was less obvious there that I could be this fireman traveling around the world. So for a period of time, I thought I would try to do it in the studio. But I think in this profession, we must all be reporters. We must all be willing to go out there and seek the facts and the evidence. I mean, who was I talking to? The Robert Caro, the famous Lyndon Johnson biographer, who has not yet written his fifth and final episode, but he has written his own memoir about working. And he said a couple of things which I think were really good. You know, maybe you can't actually define the truth. I mean, I think you can, but he said maybe you can't. But what you can do is go out and find the facts and the empirical evidence, and fact by fact, piece of evidence by piece of evidence, you build the picture that is the accurate picture of what's going on. So that's our basic responsibility. Then the other responsibility, he said, a copy editor of his, when he was a young cub reporter, had told him, you know, what you should do in your notebook when you're doing interviews is write the word "shut up." And he didn't mean for the other person to shut up, he meant for us to shut up. You know, give the space for them to talk, and then you find all the information in those spaces. Don't always believe that what you're saying is the most important. And, you know, it's an occupational hazard, and sometimes I'm guilty of that. So I've started to write SU. I'm trying to make my questions shorter and listen, more.
I'll try and do the same.
You're doing just fine, Pat. She was my boss once. I have to be good.
A good one, though, yeah.
Very good one.
You chose at another point in your personal narrative that you needed still a bigger way, a longer way, a more deeper way to tell stories, and you chose to make documentaries. Well,
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
But why?
Well, I did my first documentary with you.
True.
And again, it was a bit of a sort of a stereotype buster. I went back to Iran. I did sort of the story of reform in Iran at that time. Boy, it seems so long ago, 1999. Through sort of my own personal story. So that was
a lot of
really
trouble
good.
and got banned from going home again.
Got a lot of trouble. Yeah, I was banned for 5 years. And then I've done a few in the post 9/11 world. I've done, you know, Osama bin Laden documentaries and God's Warriors about the major sort of epochal divides, religion and politics, whether it's the Christian right in the United States, the orthodoxy in Israel, and the fundamentalism in the Islamic world, all had a major role to play in politics as well. And then I did something different. This past year, I did sex and love around the world. I thought it's time. It's time.
It is, believe me, different. And we can't show you the whole thing, but we'll just show you just maybe, well, we have time for just a bit of it, just to give you an idea of another Christiane.
I've learned from war survivors how to rebuild. I've asked world leaders about the moments that really matter. I've discovered the passion created by faith. And now I'm on a new, unexpected journey to understand the rules of engagement in our most intimate relationships. Tokyo, in a city of contradictions, I want to know more about how the women here live and love. Do you think Japanese society is changing for women?
Ladies, let's talk about sex.
We're on our way to see new refugees from Afghanistan, and I've always wanted to ask about how they managed to maintain intimacy.
Were you ever told that you also have a right to be happy, to be loved?
We have to be careful with this question. That is a dangerous question.
Well, we had to be very judicious in editing what we could share out of that documentary. But
No, it was PG. It had to be PG.
It was, but
Yeah.
it was a different look at Christiane Amanpour.
It was. Because I got this idea brushing my teeth before going to work during the height of the
Believing
Syria
in
war.
possible things before breakfast.
Correct.
Yeah.
During the height of the Syria war, and watching all these people come out, as I've seen so many, refugees fleeing throughout my career. And I suddenly thought to myself, but how does it work? I mean, it's one thing to survive, but how do you then continue as a family? How do women, I wanted to see it through women's eyes, to be honest, this series. How do you have sex in a tent with your 10 children lying next door to you and 200,000 other people as neighbors with just a thin piece of, what do you tell your daughter about growing up? And then that just spread to more questions about intimacy. It's really more intimacy than sex. We didn't do anything about, the seedy underbelly. This wasn't about, sex trafficking or pornography or prostitution. This was about ordinary people in ordinary lives, sometimes extraordinary situations, and how intimacy played a role, and particularly in empowering women, and how they felt they could claim, in the term of the day, agency in their own intimacy and fulfillment.
It's a very serious documentary.
It is, actually.
All
Fun.
kidding aside, because it does bring up issues that are very hard to discuss in any other arena. And you ask some very dangerous questions.
Oh, you heard.
You
heard that Afghan woman.
Yeah.
I mean, it was dangerous to ask an Afghan woman about whether she was happy or not.
Yeah.
A dangerous question.
Right.
That really struck me.
So we're at the end of our time together, and there's so many more questions I want to ask. But I'll just ask a dangerous one. What's next?
I'm not telling you.
That's fair.
Mostly because I don't know. More of the same.
Thank you very much,
Sex and love
Christiane.
through men's perspectives.
Oh, well, there you go. And one thing we know for sure, that whatever you do, Christiane, we can look to you to know that we are hearing the truth.
Thank you.
And we are grateful for all that you do to make that come to us.
Thank you, Pat.
And please continue.
Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. It was really fun. Thank you very much.
Christiane, tell her to come back.